So here's a thought you've probably had without ever saying it out loud. Somewhere in your head there's a better version of you. A faster one. One who remembers names, learns languages in a weekend, never blanks in the middle of a sentence. And the reason that version isn't running the show, you've been told, is simple. You're only using 10% of your brain. The other 90 is just sitting there dark and dusty, waiting for someone to flip the switch. It's a lovely idea. Honestly, it's one of the most comforting things anyone has ever made up about the human mind. And that's kind of the problem, because it's completely false, and it has been false for about 100 years, and it still won't die. So today we're not really going to bust the 10% myth. That part takes about 30 seconds, and we'll do it. The more interesting question is why your brain is so weirdly attached to a lie about itself. Let's start with where it came from. Okay, so the myth didn't come from a lab. It didn't come from a brain scan or a scientist in a white coat. It mostly came from a self-help book. Here's the short version. Back in 1907, a psychologist named William James, one of the founders of American psychology, wrote an essay called The Energies of Men. And in it he said something pretty reasonable. He said we make use of only a small part of our possible mental and physical resources. Now notice what he actually meant there. He was talking about potential, about effort, willpower, the energy you could be putting into your life but usually aren't. He never once mentioned brain tissue, and he never gave a number. And then the number showed up. In 1936, a writer named Lowell Thomas wrote the foreword to a little book you might have heard of, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, one of the best-selling self-help books ever made. And in that foreword, he took James's fuzzy, reasonable point about potential and handed it a crisp, quotable, completely invented statistic. He wrote that Professor James used to say the average person develops only 10% of his latent mental ability. That's it. That's the whole origin. A journalist rounded some of your potential up into 10% of your brain, stuck a famous professor's name on it, and printed it in a book that millions of people read. Nobody discovered anything. Somebody just phrased it well. And there's a bonus culprit you've definitely heard, which is Einstein. At some point, people started saying Einstein said it too, because of course they did. Slap Einstein's name on a claim and suddenly it's unarguable. Except when researchers actually went digging through the Einstein archives for any record of him saying this, they came up empty. He never said it. His name just got borrowed. So that's where it came from. Now let's do the actual debunking, because it really is quick. If you only use 10% of your brain, here's what should be true. You could lose the other 90 and be basically fine. 90% of it is doing nothing, right? So damage it, remove it, no big loss. But that's nowhere near how brains work. Ask any neurologist. There's almost no part of the brain you can damage, even a tiny piece, without losing something real. A little bit of tissue in the wrong spot can take away your ability to speak, or recognize a face, or feel one whole side of your body. There is no junk drawer in there. No spare 90% gathering dust. Okay, picture it like a house at night. The myth wants you to imagine your brain as a mansion where one tiny room has the light on and the other 99 are pitch black, sealed off, unused. But that's not what a scan shows at all. A scan shows a house where the lights are dimmer in some rooms and brighter in others. Sure, but there's power running to every single one. The kitchen's blazing while the bedroom's low, and a second later it flips. Nothing is ever fully switched off. There's no wing of the house you forgot you owned. Here's the fact that genuinely gets me, honestly. Your brain is about 2% of your body weight, and it burns roughly 20% of your energy. 20% for an organ that small. Now think about that from evolution's point of view. Evolution is ruthlessly cheap. It does not build expensive things and leave them switched off for fun. If 90% of your brain were actually useless, you simply wouldn't have it. It would have been trimmed away a very long time ago, the same way we lost the tails we stopped needing. Okay, so the myth is dead. We've established that. And yet it keeps walking around like nothing happened. Surveys have found something like 2 out of 3 people believe it. And it's not only people who never think about the brain. In one study of school teachers across a couple of countries, close to half of them believed it too. These are people whose entire job is the mind and learning, and the myth still got past them. So why? Why does this specific lie have 9 lives? The first reason is the most human one, and honestly it's a little tender. The 10% myth is comforting. Think about what it actually offers you. It tells you the reason you're not smarter, or sharper, or more successful isn't that you've hit your ceiling. It's that you just haven't switched on the good part yet. Your failures aren't really failures. They're a locked door with a better you waiting behind it. That's a genuinely nice thing to believe about yourself. And people don't give up nice beliefs easily. We hold on to them the way you hold on to a lottery ticket you haven't checked. As long as you don't look too closely, you might still be sitting on something huge. The second reason is sneakier, and it's really about language. Remember what William James actually said. He said you use only a small part of your potential. And here's the thing. That part is basically true. Most of us really don't use all our focus, our willpower, our effort. There genuinely is a version of your day where you tried harder and did more. So the myth has this soft, true-ish core, and wrapped around it is a hard, false shell, this idea that there's unused brain tissue. And the two sound almost identical when you say them fast. You're not using your full potential quietly slides into you're not using your full brain, and most people never clock that a swap even happened. The lie hides inside a truth. That's what makes it so hard to kill. Then there's the third reason, which is that the myth has help. A lot of help. It shows up in movies where someone takes a pill and suddenly speaks 12 languages and reads the stock market like a picture book. You've seen these films. The entire plot only works if you already believe the 90% is sitting there unused, and every time one of those movies does well, it quietly reinforces the idea for millions of people who walk out thinking, maybe. Self-help sellers love it for exactly the same reason. It's the perfect setup for whatever they're offering. Buy the course, do the technique, wake up the rest. This isn't new either. People have been using this exact line to sell things for decades. And honestly, there's a quieter fourth reason nobody really talks about. The truth just doesn't travel well. Think about it like this. You only use 10% of your brain as a story. It's got a hero, a mystery, a locked room, a promise. You can say it at a party in one breath and everyone leans in. Now try to spread the real version. Actually, your entire brain stays metabolically active across distributed networks, even at rest. Right. See how far that gets you at the party. Nobody's leaning in for that. So the myth doesn't only survive because it's comforting or camouflaged. It survives because it's a better story than the facts, and stories are what actually move between people. The truth just sits quietly in a textbook, technically winning, reaching almost no one. So put those four together. The myth feels good to believe, which means we're rooting for it before we've even checked. It's camouflaged inside a real idea about untapped potential, so the lie is genuinely hard to see. It gets repeated everywhere by people who make money repeating it, and it's a cleaner story than the truth will ever be. No wonder it won't die. A myth like that doesn't need to be correct. It just needs a support system, and this one has a great one. And this is where the myth stops being harmless trivia and starts actually costing people something. Because if you believe 90% of your brain is asleep, then every brain training product promising to wake it up suddenly sounds reasonable. Activate your hidden genius. Switch on the dormant 90%. 10 minutes a day to a superhuman memory. Here's the problem with all of it. There is no dormant 90% to wake up. You're already running the whole thing. So whatever that app or course or supplement is actually doing, it is not flipping on some sleeping reserve, because there isn't one. At best, you're practicing a skill, and sure, practice works, but that's just learning. That's the same thing that's always worked. Nobody needs to switch anything on to get better at remembering names. You need to pay attention and repeat it, which is boring and free, and doesn't sell nearly as well as a locked door with a genius behind it. The honest version is less exciting, I'll admit that. There's no switch, there's no secret room. There's just the slow, ordinary, genuinely effective work of using the brain you already fully have, a little more deliberately than you did yesterday. Here's where it gets genuinely interesting, though, because the truth about your brain isn't a downgrade from the myth. It's kind of a wild upgrade if you actually sit with it. You're not a machine idling at 10%, waiting to be plugged in. The whole thing is running right now at full spread. The reason you can read this sentence, feel a little called out by it, remember something from years ago, and start planning dinner all at the same time and without any effort, is that basically all of you is online, humming along, doing more per second than the most powerful computer we've ever built. Think about what your brain already pulled off today, before you were even fully awake. It kept your heart beating, held you upright, turned light into faces and noise into meaning, and ran all of that in the background while the you part was still deciding whether to hit snooze. None of that is 10% of anything. It's the most complicated object we know of in the entire universe, sitting inside your skull, quietly working a full shift you never even clocked it in for. Now, to be fair, there is one small grain of truth the myth grabbed and ran with, At any single instant, not every neuron is firing at once. And that's a good thing, because if they all fired together, that wouldn't be enlightenment. Honestly, that's a lot closer to a seizure. So yes, you're never using every cell at the exact same moment, but across a day, you use all of it. Every part earns its keep. So the next time you catch yourself thinking about that better, faster, 90% version of you locked away somewhere, here's what I'd gently offer. There's no locked room. There never was. The you that remembers names and stays calm and follows through isn't hidden behind a door you haven't found yet. That version is just you. On a day you paid a little more attention and got a little more sleep. Same brain, fully in use, always was. And that's the part I find kind of freeing, honestly. You don't have to wake anything up. You just get to work with the whole strange, fully online organ you've already got. The 10% myth isn't a map to a hidden you. It's a bedtime story we tell ourselves because the truth felt too big to hold. If any of this made you want to go further into why we fall for these comfortable half-truths about our own minds so easily, there's a book on the psychology of everyday myths that I keep coming back to, and I've linked it down below. It's a genuinely fun read, and it goes way past just the brain stuff. That's the 10% myth. 100 years old, completely wrong, and honestly kind of lovely, which is probably the whole reason we keep it around.